The sound of expensive cutlery against fine china filled the private dining room at Salvatore's. I wiped sweaty palms against my black uniform skirt, trying to steady my breathing as I balanced the tray of drinks. 6 months at this upscale Italian restaurant had taught me to become invisible, a skill that kept me employed and safe. Tonight, that skill abandoned me. A child's wail cut through the room's hushed atmosphere, slicing through conversations and drawing every eye to the corner booth. Everyone except the man whose attention the little girl so desperately sought. I'd noticed them when they arrived, the girl in a velvet dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and him, the man everyone called Mr. Castellano, though I'd heard others whisper Adriano when they thought no one was listening. "Please, sweetheart, eat something," he murmured, his voice a contrast to his appearance, gentle where everything else about him suggested danger. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccably tailored to broad shoulders. A heavy watch glinted on his wrist as he pushed a plate of pasta closer to the little girl. She shook her head, dark curls bouncing, her tiny face crumpling further. I shouldn't have been watching so intently. Shouldn't have lingered, but something in the girl's eyes, desperate and sad, held me in place a moment too long. "Is there a problem with my daughter's food?" His voice, suddenly directed at me, made me flinch. His eyes, a piercing hazel that seemed to shift between green and gold under the restaurant's dim lighting, fixed on mine. No, sir," I stammered, lowering my gaze immediately. A chill ran down my spine despite the kitchen's heat still clinging to my skin. Marco, the restaurant owner, had warned all staff about Mr. Castellano. "Treat him like royalty," he'd said, "and pretend you don't see or hear anything." I'd understood the unspoken warning. The man controlled half the city through businesses that had nothing to do with fine dining. The little girl let out another sob, softer this time, more resigned, as though she'd learned early that tears rarely changed her circumstances. Without thinking, a fatal error in hindsight, I knelt to her eye level. "Hey there," I said softly, ignoring the sudden tension that radiated from her father. "Sometimes when I'm sad, I draw pictures on napkins. Would you like to try?" I reached for a crisp linen napkin, aware that Mr. Castellano had gone very still. From the corner of my eye, I saw his bodyguard shift slightly, hand moving inside his jacket. My heart hammered against my ribs. But I focused on the child whose tears had quieted to hiccups. She nodded, and I handed her the napkin along with the pen I kept in my apron pocket. "Emma." Mr. Castellano's voice carried a warning wrapped in silk. "I don't believe this young lady is paid to entertain you." I rose quickly, cheeks burning. "I'm sorry, sir. I just thought... She just misses a mom." The words escaped me before I could stop them. An observation formed from countless families I'd served, from the way the little girl looked at other children dining with their mothers. For one breathless moment, the room seemed to freeze. Even the bodyguards flanking the private dining area turned to stone. Mr. Castellano's jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath the smooth skin. When he looked at me again, something had changed in his gaze, something that made my skin prickle with warning. "Your name." It wasn't a question. "Sophia," I answered, unable to look away from his stare. "Sophia Russo." "Italian?" A eyebrow raised fractionally. "On my father's side. He passed away." I wasn't sure why I offered this information, except perhaps as some instinctive effort to humanize myself before this man who could probably have me fired with a snap of his fingers, or worse. His gaze lingered, assessing, calculating something I couldn't understand. Finally, he nodded toward his daughter. "Emma seems to like you, Sophia Russo." The way he pronounced my name, rolling the R slightly, made it sound like he was tasting it, committing it to memory. I should have recognized the danger in that moment, should have made an excuse and retreated to the safety of the kitchen. Instead, I smiled at Emma, whose tears had dried as she concentrated on drawing something that looked like a house with stick figures. "She's very sweet," I said, meaning it. "Sweet," he repeated, as if testing an unfamiliar word. "Yes, she is." He studied me with uncomfortable intensity before adding, "You may bring the dessert menu now." I nodded and turned to leave, relief washing over me as I escaped his presence. I didn't notice the phone in his hand, didn't see him gesture to one of his men who slipped out the restaurant's front door. I finished my shift at midnight, exhausted but satisfied with the tips. Mr. Castellano had left an obscene amount, enough to cover my overdue electric bill and still have something left over. As I pushed through the back door into the alley behind Salvatore's, the cold October air hit my face, a welcome relief after hours in the steamy kitchen. 3 steps toward the bus stop, and headlights flared to life, blinding me momentarily. A sleek black car idled where there should have been only darkness. My heart stuttered as the back door swung open. Miss Russo. It was the same bodyguard who'd been at the restaurant. Mr. Castellano would like a word. My throat closed. I need to catch my bus. That won't be necessary. Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Is this about what I said? I didn't mean to offend. Please. The guard gestured to the open door, where I could now make out the shadowy figure of Mr. Castellano inside. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where? The alley had only 2 exits, and I'd never make it past this man. With trembling legs, I approached the car, the scent of expensive leather washing over me as I slid reluctantly onto the seat. Mr. Castellano sat opposite me, his posture relaxed yet commanding. The interior lights were dimmed, casting his face in shadows that emphasized the sharp angles of his jaw and cheekbones. "Where is Emma?" I asked, immediately regretting the question when his eyes narrowed. "Asleep at home, with her nanny." His voice was cool, measured. "You made quite an impression on her, Miss Russo." The car pulled away from the curb. I dug my fingernails into my palms to keep from panicking. "Mr. Castellano, I apologize if I overstepped. I didn't mean—" "How much do you make at Salvatore's?" he interrupted, as if my apology was irrelevant. The question caught me off guard. What? Your salary, plus tips, monthly." I swallowed hard. "About $2,400 if it's a good month." He made a sound, not quite dismissive but close, and looked out the window at the passing streetlights. "That's insufficient." "It's enough," I said, a flicker of defensiveness rising through my fear. "I manage." His gaze returned to me, and one corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement. The 1-bedroom apartment on Westfield. 3rd floor, no elevator, unreliable heating, a neighbor who plays music until 3 a.m. Ice flooded my veins. "How do you know where I live?" He didn't answer my question. Instead, he said, "Emma hasn't spoken to any adult besides me and her nanny in months. Not since her mother left." He paused, eyes fixing on mine. "She spoke to you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I remained silent, heart hammering as the car turned onto an unfamiliar street lined with expensive brownstones. "Her mother," he continued, voice hardening, "decided motherhood was inconvenient once she secured a portion of my wealth. She's in Monaco now, with her 24-year-old yoga instructor." "I'm sorry," I said softly, surprised to find I meant it. Not for him, this dangerous man who clearly had me investigated in the span of hours, but for Emma, whose sad eyes now made perfect sense. The car slowed to a stop outside a restaurant I recognized as one of the most exclusive in the city, closed at this hour to everyone except, apparently, Adriano Castellano. "I have a proposition for you, Sophia Russo." He leaned forward slightly, close enough that I caught the scent of his cologne. "Something expensive and subtle. You will have dinner with me, and we'll discuss Emma's future. And yours." Confusion replaced some of my fear. Her future? I don't understand. Emma needs consistency. She needs someone who sees her, really sees her, as you did tonight. His eyes, unreadable in the dim light, stayed fixed on mine. She needs a mother figure. Realization dawned slowly, absurdly. "You can't possibly mean—" "I'm offering you a position, Miss Russo, as Emma's live-in nanny." Relief flooded me, followed immediately by suspicion. "Why me? You don't know anything about me." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I know everything about you. 24 years old. Nursing degree. Incomplete. Dropped out after your father's medical bills consumed your savings. No living relatives since your grandmother passed last year. Clean record. No debt except student loans, and you send flowers to your father's grave every month." He paused. "You're honest. You work hard. And most importantly, Emma responded to you." My skin crawled at how thoroughly he'd invaded my privacy in just a few hours. What makes you think I'd accept? Triple your current salary. Private suite in my home, all expenses covered. He named a figure that made me blink. Plus, benefits. The car door opened, held by the silent bodyguard. Mr. Castellano extended his hand, his expression making it clear he expected me to take it. I haven't agreed to anything, I said, even as I found myself placing my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong. Have dinner with me, Sophia, then decide. I should have refused, should have demanded to be taken home. Instead, I stepped out of the car, my hand still in his, and allowed him to lead me into the darkened restaurant where a single table waited, set with candles and crystal. My daughter cried for her mother tonight, he said, his voice low as he held my chair. But she smiled for you. Do you understand the rarity of that? I didn't. Not really. But as I sat across from this powerful, dangerous man whose eyes never left my face, I sensed that I was crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. One dinner, I said, trying to sound firm despite the tremor in my voice. And then I decide. His smile this time seemed genuine, revealing perfect white teeth. Of course. You always have a choice, Sophia. But even then, with the city lights glittering beyond the windows and the rich aroma of wine filling the air between us, I suspected that choice was merely an illusion he allowed me to believe in. And somehow, that made him all the more dangerous. Block 2. Candles flickered, casting golden shadows across the white tablecloth. The restaurant was eerily silent without its usual bustle. No clinking glasses, no murmured conversations, just the occasional soft footfall of the lone waiter who appeared and disappeared like a ghost at Mr. Castellano's subtle gestures. You haven't touched your wine, his observation cut through my thoughts. I glanced down at the untouched ruby liquid. I don't drink much. Never, or just tonight? His eyes, constantly assessing, missing nothing, studied my face. Rarely, I admitted. My father was... I hesitated, unsure why I was telling him this. He struggled with alcohol after my mother died. Mr. Castellano nodded once, then gestured to the waiter, who immediately removed my wine glass and replaced it with water. The small consideration unsettled me more than his intimidation had. Tell me about your experience with children, he said as the first course arrived. Something delicate involving scallops that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I shifted in my seat. I worked in pediatrics during my nursing training, and I used to babysit through college. But no formal childcare qualifications. No. He considered this, cutting his food with precise movements. It doesn't matter. Emma doesn't need qualifications. She needs someone who sees her. Mr. Castellano? Adriano, he corrected smoothly. If you're to live in my home, formality seems excessive. The casual mention of my potential employment sent a chill through me. I haven't agreed to anything, yet, he added, the hint of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Tell me what's holding you back. The money is substantial. The accommodation's exceptional. I set my fork down, gathering courage. Perhaps the fact that within hours of meeting me, you had me investigated, followed, and essentially kidnapped from my workplace. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps. Kidnapped? The car door wasn't locked, Sophia. You could have left at any time. We both knew that wasn't true. As for the investigation, he continued, I have a 4-year-old daughter. Would you expect me to invite someone into her life without verification? Put that way, it sounded almost reasonable. Almost. Your reputation precedes you, I said carefully. I've heard things about your business dealings. Have you? It wasn't a question. His tone remained pleasant, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I pushed on, recklessness born of fear giving me courage. They say you control half the import business in the city, that politicians and police chiefs are on your payroll, that people who cross you disappear. His expression remained impassive. And you believe everything you hear? I believe in smoke and fire. He set his cutlery down with deliberate care. My business interests are diverse, Sophia. Some operate in gray areas of the law, I won't insult your intelligence by claiming otherwise. His gaze locked with mine, but Emma exists in a separate realm. Her world is secure, privileged, and completely legitimate, as would be your employment. The waiter appeared, clearing our plates and serving the next course. I used the interruption to gather my thoughts, acutely aware that this conversation was treading dangerous ground. Why not hire a professional nanny? Someone with references, experience with... I hesitated, then finished. With your lifestyle. I've employed 5 nannies in the past year, all with impeccable credentials, all utterly forgettable to Emma. He leaned forward slightly. She's withdrawn since her mother left. Tonight was the first time she's engaged with a stranger in months. Despite myself, my heart ached for the little girl with the sad eyes. Children are resilient. With time is precisely what I lack, he interrupted, a new edge to his voice. My business requires travel, meetings. I cannot be with Emma as much as she needs. And her mother? Couldn't she? Is not a subject for discussion. His tone ended that line of conversation definitively. After a moment, he added, Claudia signed away her parental rights in exchange for a settlement. She has no interest in motherhood. I thought of the little girl drawing silently on a napkin, and anger flared unexpectedly. How could anyone abandon their child like that? Something changed in his expression. Approval, perhaps. Indeed. The main course arrived, perfectly cooked steak for him, pasta with seafood for me. We ate in silence for several minutes before he spoke again. Your apartment lease ends next month. I nearly choked on my food. You checked my lease? I'm thorough. He said it as if it were perfectly normal to investigate a stranger's housing situation. The building has been purchased. Rents will increase by 40%. My stomach dropped. I was already stretching my budget to the breaking point. That's not possible. There are laws with loopholes, he cut in smoothly. The new owner planned significant renovations, which allow for substantial increases. Suspicion bloomed. And who is this new owner? He met my gaze steadily, not bothering to deny what we both knew. You could live rent-free in a private suite with security, a separate entrance, and complete autonomy when not caring for Emma. Or scramble to find another apartment in your price range in a city with a housing crisis. Anger flashed hot behind my eyes. So that's your strategy? Back me into a corner financially? I'm presenting options. The choice remains yours. I set my fork down with more force than necessary. This isn't a choice. It's coercion. Perhaps, he acknowledged with a slight inclination of his head. But consider this. You need employment and housing. Emma needs stability and care. I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone. Except I'd be working for a man who thinks nothing of manipulating people's lives to get what he wants. His lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You've just described every CEO in America, Sophia. You're not just a CEO. No, he agreed, his voice dropping lower. I'm not. The implied danger hung between us, acknowledged but unspoken. I should have been more frightened than I was. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. The clarity that comes when options narrow to a single path. If, and I mean if, I were to consider this position, I would need guarantees. Interest flickered in his eyes. Name them. Complete autonomy over Emma's daily routine. Your input is welcome, but no overriding my decisions without discussion. He considered this, then nodded once. Acceptable, within reason. A written contract with severance provisions if things don't work out. Of course. And I hesitated, then plunged ahead. No expectation of additional services. His expression hardened instantly, a dangerous glint in his eyes. I don't pay for sex, Miss Russo. Not with money, not with employment. Is that clear? My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but I held his gaze. Perfectly. Good. He signaled for dessert. Any other concerns? Your business associates. I don't want Emma exposed to any danger. My home is the most secure location in the city. Emma's safety is my highest priority. His voice softened slightly when he mentioned his daughter. She has never been, and will never be exposed to the less savory aspects of my business dealings. Dessert arrived, something chocolate and decadent that I barely tasted. My mind raced through options, consequences, possibilities. The truth was, I needed this job. Nursing school had been put on permanent hold after my father's medical bills decimated our savings, and entry-level healthcare positions paid little better than waiting tables. The salary Adriano offered would let me rebuild my savings, maybe even restart my education eventually. And then there was Emma. The image of her tear-stained face haunted me. I want to meet her properly, I said finally. Spend a day with her before making my decision. Adriano set his espresso cup down with a soft clink. That can be arranged. Tomorrow? I have a shift at the restaurant. No, you don't. At my startled look, he added, I spoke with Marco. You've been granted a leave of absence. Indignation flared. You had no right. It's paid leave, he interrupted smoothly. Your position remains open should you decline my offer. The casual display of power, rearranging my life without consultation, should have been the final warning. Instead, I found myself saying, fine, tomorrow then. The hint of a satisfied smile played at his lips. My driver will collect you at 9. The remainder of dinner passed in relative silence. I was too overwhelmed to maintain conversation, and Adriano seemed content to observe me, his gaze a tangible weight I couldn't escape. When we finished, he escorted me outside where the same black car waited. Until tomorrow, Sophia. He opened the car door himself, no driver this time, his fingers brushing mine as he helped me inside. The brief contact sent an unexpected shiver up my arm. The drive to my apartment was swift and silent. When we arrived, Adriano surprised me by walking me to the building entrance, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back. The touch was proper, even courteous, but I remained acutely aware of it, of him, towering beside me with his bodyguard following at a discreet distance. Sleep well, he said as we reached my door. His eyes, amber in the hallway's poor lighting, lingered on my face. Tomorrow will be illuminating. I slipped inside without responding, locking the door and leaning against it, heart pounding. What had I gotten myself into? Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed in my narrow bed, mind cycling through the evening's events. By dawn, I'd convinced myself to call it off, to tell Adriano Castellano that I couldn't accept his offer regardless of the financial consequences. Then I checked my bank account. A deposit had been made at 3 a.m. The amount, precisely 3 months of my salary at Salvatore's, was labeled consultation fee. It was exactly enough to cover my overdue bills, with enough left to float me until I found another job if necessary. The message was clear. He was buying the opportunity to convince me. Nothing more. I could walk away after tomorrow with the money. The choice was still mine, or so I told myself. At precisely 9 o'clock, a knock came at my door. I'd expected the stone-faced driver, but Adriano himself stood in my hallway, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Unlike the previous night, Emma stood beside him, her small hand engulfed in his, her dark eyes regarding me with solemn curiosity. "Good morning, Sophia," Adriano said, his gaze sweeping over my simple jeans and sweater with unreadable assessment. "Hi," Emma whispered, her voice so soft I almost missed it. I knelt to her level, smiling. "Hello, Emma. I like your dress." It was pale blue with embroidered butterflies. Beautiful but practical for a child. Not the formal attire she'd worn at the restaurant. She studied me for a long moment, then asked, "Are you going to be my new nanny?" The directness caught me off guard. I glanced up at Adriano, who watched our interaction with intense focus. "I'm not sure yet," I answered honestly. "I thought maybe we could spend the day together first, to see if we get along." She considered this with a seriousness no 4-year-old should possess, then nodded once. "Okay." As I rose, Adriano's eyes met mine over his daughter's head. "Thank you for agreeing to today," he said quietly. Something in his tone, a vulnerability at odds with his powerful presence, made me wonder if the great Adriano Castellano was actually nervous about my decision. "I haven't agreed to anything permanent," I reminded him. "Yet," he said, echoing his word from dinner. His confidence should have irritated me, but there was something almost playful in his tone, a lightness I hadn't witnessed before. Emma tugged at his hand. "Daddy, can we go to the park?" Adriano's expression softened as he looked down at his daughter. Perhaps Sophia would prefer something else for today. Both pairs of eyes turned to me, one hopeful, one assessing. I smiled at Emma. "The park sounds perfect." She didn't smile back, but some of the wariness left her eyes. Adriano nodded once, seemingly pleased, and gestured toward the elevator. "Shall we?" As we walked down the hallway, I realized my neighbor's door was ajar, curious eyes peering through the crack. By tonight, the entire building would know I'd left with the intimidating man in the expensive suit and the silent bodyguard who materialized behind us. I wondered if I would be coming back. The park, as it turned out, was a private botanical garden normally closed to the public on Mondays. Somehow I wasn't surprised that such rules didn't apply to Adriano Castellano. The guard at the gate had simply nodded respectfully as our car approached, swinging the ornate iron gates open without a word. "Do you always get special access to closed venues?" I asked as we walked along a stone path, bordered by late-blooming roses. Emma had run slightly ahead, though I noticed she never strayed far from her father's sight. Adriano's mouth curved slightly. "Time and money open most doors." "And those that don't open?" His eyes, warm amber in the morning sunlight, flickered to mine. "Those require more creative solutions." I suppressed a shiver at the implication and focused on Emma instead. She moved with purpose toward a small pond where koi fish swam lazy circles beneath lily pads. When we caught up, she was kneeling at the edge, watching the fish with rapt attention. "They know me," she said without looking up. "They remember I feed them." Adriano reached into his pocket and produced a small container of fish food pellets. The practiced motion suggested this was a familiar ritual. He handed it to Emma, who carefully sprinkled a few pellets onto the water's surface. Instantly, the pond erupted with activity as orange and white fish competed for the offering. "We come here every Monday," Adriano explained, his voice pitched for my ears only. "It's her favorite place." I watched as Emma meticulously distributed the food, ensuring every section of the pond received equal attention. There was something methodical in her movements that seemed beyond her years, a precision that mirrored her father's careful control. "She's very detail-oriented," I observed. Pride flickered across Adriano's face. "She notices everything. Like her father," I said before I could stop myself. His gaze sharpened on my face. "You're observant yourself, Sophia." We fell silent, watching Emma complete her feeding ritual. When she finished, she carefully closed the container and returned it to her father, who pocketed it with a murmured, "Thank you, Piccola." "She speaks Italian?" I asked, as Emma returned to studying the fish. "Some." "Her mother," he paused, his expression hardening momentarily, "wasn't interested in maintaining her heritage. I've been teaching her since her mother left them." He didn't need to finish the sentence. "I know some Italian," I offered. "My grandmother insisted, said our heritage shouldn't die with geography." Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "Your grandmother was a wise woman." We continued walking, Emma occasionally darting ahead to examine flowers or insects before returning to our orbit. I noticed how Adriano's bodyguards, there were 3 today, maintained a discreet distance, positioned to monitor all approaches to our location without intruding on our bubble of privacy. "They're always with you?" I asked, nodding subtly toward the men. "Always," he confirmed without elaboration. "Even at home?" "The property is secure. Inside the house we have privacy." His gaze met mine. "You would never feel observed." The implication that he'd sensed my concern about living under constant surveillance was unsettling. Was I that transparent, or was he that adept at reading people? "Daddy, I'm hungry," Emma announced, appearing suddenly at his side. Adriano checked his watch. Platinum, I noticed, not gold like most men would choose. "Right on schedule," he said with warm affection that transformed his stern features. To me, he added, "She's extremely punctual. Lunch is always at 11:30. The observation might have seemed trivial, but I recognized it for what it was. He was sharing his daughter's patterns, her preferences, testing my response to her needs. We settled at a small pavilion where, Remarkably, a table had already been set with a light lunch. I wondered how many staff had been coordinated to create this seemingly effortless day, how many people worked invisibly to smooth Adriano Castellano's path through the world. Emma sat beside her father rather than across from him, I noticed. Their movements showed practiced coordination, him cutting her sandwich into precise triangles, her waiting patiently without having to ask. They functioned as a unit, these two, with understanding born of shared routine. "Do you like tuna salad, Sophia?" Emma asked unexpectedly, studying me with those serious dark eyes so like her father's. "I do," I answered, surprised by the direct question from the previously reticent child. She nodded as if confirming a theory. "Daddy said you might. That's why we have it today." I glanced at Adriano, who was focused on pouring Emma's apple juice with careful precision. Another piece of information he'd somehow gathered about me, another reminder of how thoroughly he'd investigated my life. "Your daddy is very thoughtful," I said neutrally. Emma considered this. "He remembers everything important." Something in the way she said it, with absolute conviction, tugged at my heart. This little girl trusted her father completely, saw his attention to detail as evidence of care rather than control. And perhaps for her, it was. As we ate, Emma gradually emerged from her shell, offering small observations about the gardens, the fish, the butterfly she'd seen earlier. She didn't smile often, but when she did, her entire face transformed, and so did her father's. In those moments, watching Adriano's expression soften as he responded to his daughter's rare joy, I glimpsed the man beneath the intimidating exterior. After lunch, Emma asked if she could show me her favorite flowers. Adriano nodded, and she slipped her small hand into mine with surprising confidence. The gesture, so simple yet so telling, wasn't lost on her father, whose eyes tracked our joined hands with an unreadable expression. Emma led me along winding paths, pointing out particular blooms with the expertise of a frequent visitor. Her knowledge was impressive for a 4-year-old. She knew names, colors, which ones attracted butterflies. Occasionally, she would glance back to ensure her father was still following at a discreet distance, relaxing visibly when she confirmed his presence. "These are the prettiest," she declared finally, stopping before a bed of late-blooming dahlias in vibrant pinks and purples. I knelt beside her. "They're beautiful. Do you know what they're called?" "Dahlias," she said confidently. "Daddy says they mean dignity and elegance." I glanced back at Adriano, surprised. "You know the language of flowers?" A hint of color touched his cheekbones, the first sign of anything approaching embarrassment I'd seen from him. "My mother was a florist," he said simply. The unexpected glimpse into his past fascinated me more than it should have. Before I could ask more, Emma tugged my hand again. "Can I show you the secret garden?" she asked, her voice hushed with importance. I looked to Adriano, who nodded permission. "The Japanese garden," he explained. "It's her special place." Emma led us down a secluded path to a small garden enclosed by bamboo. Inside, a miniature landscape of carefully arranged rocks, moss, and pruned trees created an atmosphere of tranquil seclusion. A tiny waterfall trickled over stones into a small pool where a single golden koi swam in solitary splendor. "His name is Emperor," Emma informed me solemnly. "He's too big to live with the other fish. They were afraid of him." I sat on a stone bench, watching as she knelt by the pool, speaking softly to the fish in what sounded like a mixture of English and Italian. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. The powerful golden fish, separated from others, living in privileged isolation. Adriano sat beside me, leaving a respectful distance between us. For several minutes, we simply watched Emma in comfortable silence. "She's remarkable," I said finally, meaning it. "Yes." The simple agreement carried layers of pride, love, and perhaps concern. "She's also lonely," I added quietly. He didn't deny it. "Yes." "No friends her age." His jaw tightened slightly. "Security concerns make playdates complicated. She'll begin private school next fall with appropriate safeguards. Another year of isolation for a child already withdrawn." The thought made my chest ache. Children need social interaction to develop normally, I said, professional training overriding my caution about challenging him. Even with security concerns, there must be safe ways to provide that. Instead of bristling at my implicit criticism, Adriano turned to study my face. That's precisely why you're here, Sophia. I recognize my limitations. Emma needs more than I can provide alone. The honesty in his admission disarmed me. Here was this powerful man, acknowledging a vulnerability, not in himself, but in his ability to give his daughter everything she needed. It humanized him in a way that all his wealth and power had not. I'm not a miracle worker, I warned. And I'm not a replacement for her mother. I'm not asking you to be either, he replied. Just be Sophia, the woman who saw my daughter when no one else did. Before I could respond, Emma returned to us, her mission with Emperor the Fish complete. She climbed onto the bench between us, her small body fitting naturally into the space as if it had been reserved for her. Can we get ice cream now? She asked, looking up at her father with expectation that suggested this, too, was part of their Monday ritual. Adriano checked his watch again, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as a cornerstone of his carefully structured world. It's ice cream time, he agreed, standing and offering one hand to Emma, who took it immediately. After a moment's hesitation, he extended his other hand to me. The gesture felt weighted with significance beyond simple assistance from the bench. I placed my fingers in his, noting how they disappeared into his warm grip, how easily his strength could envelop me. The small Italian gelateria was, like the garden, closed to the public, but miraculously open for us. The elderly proprietor greeted Adriano with respectful familiarity and Emma with grandfatherly affection, pinching her cheek gently and asking about La Principessa's day in heavily accented English. Emma ordered stracciatella without hesitation. Adriano declined with a small shake of his head when the owner looked to him expectantly. When my turn came, I asked for pistachio, earning an approving nod from the old man. Signor Castellano's mother, she always order pistachio, he told me with a wink. Good choice, good choice. I glanced at Adriano, who had gone very still, his expression unreadable. Another piece of the puzzle that was this complicated man. A mother who loved flowers and pistachio gelato. A mother he clearly still missed, judging by the fleeting shadow that crossed his face. We sat at a small table while Emma methodically enjoyed her ice cream, occasionally offering her father a spoonful which he accepted with grave courtesy. The ritual struck me as poignant, a child caring for her parent in the small way she could. Would you like to try mine? I asked her impulsively, offering a small spoonful of the pale green gelato. She considered the offer with characteristic seriousness, then nodded. After tasting, she declared, "It's good, but not as good as mine," with such matter-of-fact certainty that I laughed. The sound seemed to startle both her and her father. Emma's eyes widened slightly, and Adriano's gaze sharpened on my face with sudden intensity, as though my laughter was a rare bird he was trying to catalog. "What's funny?" Emma asked, curiosity overriding shyness. "Just your honesty," I explained. "It's refreshing." She tilted her head. "Daddy says we should always be honest." I raised an eyebrow at Adriano, unable to resist. "Always?" His lips curved slightly. "Within reason," he amended, eyes holding mine with unexpected warmth. As Emma returned to her ice cream, Adriano leaned closer to me, his voice pitched for my ears only. "You're good with her." The simple observation shouldn't have pleased me as much as it did. She makes it easy. She's a wonderful child. "And your decision?" he asked, the question casual, but his eyes intense. "Have you reached one?" I hesitated, watching Emma carefully scoop the last bit of gelato from her cup. Despite all my reservations about Adriano Castellano and his world, I couldn't deny the connection I felt with his daughter, or her obvious need for someone who could bridge the isolation her father's position forced upon her. "I have conditions," I said finally, "beyond what we discussed last night." Interest flickered in his gaze. "Name them." "Emma needs social interaction with children her age, supervised playdates, activity classes, something to prepare her for school next year." He considered this, then nodded once. "With appropriate security measures. She needs routine but also spontaneity, flexibility, Room to be a child. Agreed. And I need certain guarantees about my position in your household. I met his gaze directly. I won't be treated as a servant or an employee in front of her. If I'm to provide a nurturing presence in her life, I need to be respected as such. Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. You'll have the status of a family member, Sophia. My staff will be instructed accordingly. Emma finished her ice cream and looked between us curiously, sensing the importance of our quiet conversation. Adriano smoothly transitioned back to her, asking if she'd enjoyed her treat. As she nodded, I noticed a small smudge of chocolate on her cheek. Without thinking, I dampened my napkin with water and reached to clean her face. It was such a natural, maternal gesture that I didn't realize its significance until I caught Adriano watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Something between satisfaction and an emotion far more complex. There, I said, finishing the small task. All clean. Emma touched her cheek where my hand had been, then gave me a tiny, precious smile. Thank you, Sophia. In that moment, looking into her hopeful eyes, I knew my decision was made. Whether wisdom or folly, I couldn't walk away from this child. You're welcome, Emma, I replied, my decision settling into certainty. When I glanced at Adriano, the knowing look in his eyes told me he'd read my capitulation before I'd even spoken it aloud. He'd won, and we both knew it. Yet somehow, it didn't feel like surrender. The transition into Adriano Castellano's world happened with the same efficient precision that seemed to characterize everything in his life. Within 3 days of our ice cream at the gelateria, I had signed a meticulously detailed contract, packed my meager belongings, and been installed in what Adriano casually referred to as your suite in his sprawling Manhattan penthouse. Suite was an understatement. The space, larger than my entire apartment, included a bedroom with a king-sized bed draped in linens finer than any I'd ever touched, a sitting room with a wall of bookshelves already stocked with nursing texts and child development books, a luxurious bathroom with a soaking tub, and a small private balcony overlooking Central Park. The rooms had been freshly painted in soft blues and creams, furnished with elegant but comfortable pieces that somehow matched my personal taste, despite my never having discussed it. How did you know? I asked Adriano when he showed me the space, running my fingers along the spines of medical texts I'd been unable to afford when I left nursing school. He shrugged slightly, hands in his pockets as he watched me explore. You mentioned nursing school. The books seemed practical. But it wasn't just the books. It was everything. The colors, the reading nook by the window, the absence of modern artwork that dominated the rest of his sleek, contemporary home. My space felt warm, personal. You had my apartment photographed, I realized suddenly. You copied my style. A hint of color touched his cheekbones, that rare glimpse of something approaching embarrassment. Not copied, elevated. I should have been angry at the invasion of privacy. Instead, I found myself oddly touched by the effort, the attention to detail. Thank you, I said simply. He nodded once, clearly more comfortable with action than acknowledgement. Emma's room is through that door. He indicated a connecting door on the far wall. My suite is at the end of the hall. The staff quarters are downstairs. The layout wasn't lost on me. I'd been placed in the family wing, not with the other employees. Another statement of my ambiguous position in this household. That first night, after helping Emma with her bedtime routine, bath, stories, the precise arrangement of stuffed animals that had to be just so, I sat on my new balcony, wrapped in a cashmere throw I could never have afforded, and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. The city sprawled before me, lights twinkling in the autumn darkness. Somewhere far below, people went about their ordinary lives, unaware of the rarefied world I'd stepped into. A world of privilege and danger so intertwined, they had become indistinguishable. A soft knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Adriano stood in the hallway, a bottle of wine and 2 glasses in his hands. He'd changed from his usual suit into dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that made him look younger, less intimidating, though no less commanding. I thought you might be having second thoughts, he said, his perception once again unnervingly accurate. May I come in? I hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. He moved past me, his cologne, subtle and expensive, briefly enveloping me as he passed. You don't drink, he remembered, pausing. I can bring something else. Wine is fine occasionally, I said. surprised by his consideration. Especially on nights like this. He nodded and continued to the balcony, setting the glasses on the small table. As he poured, I noticed the label. Something French and undoubtedly costly. "How is Emma settling in?" he asked, handing me a glass as I took the seat opposite him. "She's excited to have me here," I said honestly, though I think she's still uncertain about where I fit. "That makes two of us," he murmured. So quietly I almost missed it. I studied him over the rim of my glass. In the dim light, with the city glittering behind him, Adriano Castellano looked almost vulnerable, a man navigating unfamiliar territory. "I meant to ask," I said, "where is Emma's regular nanny? The one you mentioned at the restaurant?" "Mrs. Patel tendered her resignation last week. She's returned to London for family reasons." His tone was neutral, but something in his eyes made me wonder if those family reasons had been financially incentivized to create this vacancy at precisely the right moment. "Convenient timing," I observed. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Isn't it?" I sipped my wine, unwilling to pursue that particular thread. "Emma mentioned piano lessons tomorrow." He nodded. "Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4. Her teacher comes here." "What else should I know about her schedule?" "It's all in the folder on your desk. Daily routines, activities, preferences, medical information." At my raised eyebrow, he added, "I told you I'm thorough. So, I'm learning." I hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering me since I'd arrived. "The staff, do they know why I'm here? What you expect of me?" Adriano studied me over his wineglass. "They know you're Emma's caregiver and that you're to be treated with the respect accorded to family. And what exactly does that mean in practice?" He considered the question with characteristic precision. "It means you have authority over matters concerning Emma. It means your requests are prioritized. It means you answer to me, and only to me." The last statement hung between us, laden with implications that made my pulse quicken. I changed the subject. "Emma mentioned her mother today. Asked if I knew her." Adriano's expression hardened instantly. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That I'd never met her mother, but that I was here to take care of her now." I watched his reaction carefully. "She's going to have questions, Adriano. Children need to process loss." He set his glass down with controlled precision. "Claudia abandoned her daughter for a younger man and a life free of responsibility." "What exactly would you suggest I tell Emma about that?" The bitterness in his voice revealed more than he likely intended. Whatever had happened between Adriano and his ex-wife had left wounds that hadn't healed. "Age-appropriate truth," I said gently. "That sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love, that it wasn't Emma's fault, that she still loved and wanted." He was silent for a long moment, looking out over the city. Finally, he said, "I've never lied to my daughter. I don't intend to start. Truth isn't always kind. Neither is life." His gaze returned to mine, intense in the dim light. "But we protect those we care about as best we can, don't we?" The question felt weighted with meaning beyond our discussion of Emma. Before I could respond, his phone vibrated. He glanced at it, his expression shifting subtly. "I have to take this," he said, rising. "Business." I nodded, watching as he stepped into my sitting room to answer the call in rapid Italian, his tone shifting to something harder, more commanding than the voice he used with Emma or me. This, I realized, was a glimpse of the other Adriano, the one who controlled businesses in gray areas of the law. The call was brief. When he returned, he seemed to have settled something complex, with just a few words. Power radiated from him, like heat from a banked fire. "You should get some rest," he said, gathering the wine glasses. "Emma rises early." 5:30, I confirmed, having already learned this detail from her schedule. "Will you be joining us for breakfast?" Something like regret crossed his face. "Not tomorrow. I have early meetings." As he turned to leave, I found myself asking, "Is it always like this, the separate lives?" He paused at the door, looking back at me with an unreadable expression. "What do you mean?" "You and Emma. Living parallel lives under one roof." His jaw tightened. "My work requires certain compartmentalization." "She misses you," I said simply. "Even when you're here." I expected anger at my presumption. Instead, he seemed to consider my words carefully. "I'm doing my best, Sophia," he said finally, a rare admission of imperfection. "Perhaps that's why you're here." With that, he was gone, leaving me with more questions than answers about the complicated man who was now my employer. The days settled into a rhythm. Emma and I breakfasted together each morning in the sunny kitchen nook, Adriano joining us when his schedule permitted, which was less often than I would have liked for Emma's sake. Mornings were for educational activities, reading, numbers, simple science experiments that made her serious face light up with wonder. Afternoons brought scheduled lessons or outings, always with security hovering at a discreet distance. Adriano and I developed our own routine of evening debriefings, usually on my balcony if weather permitted. He would arrive precisely at 9 after Emma was asleep, sometimes with wine, sometimes with tea. We would discuss Emma's day, her progress, her needs. Gradually, these conversations extended beyond his daughter to books, current events, even tentative personal revelations. His childhood in a modest Brooklyn neighborhood, my dreams of finishing nursing school. I learned that beneath the intimidating exterior was a mind of extraordinary breadth and precision. He could discuss literature, history, or medicine with equal facility. He read constantly, applied ruthless analysis to every problem, and possessed a memory that bordered on photographic. In another life, he might have been a surgeon or a scholar. 2 weeks into my new position, I initiated a change to Emma's routine that I knew might meet with resistance. "I'd like to enroll her in a children's art class," I told Adriano during our evening meeting. His expression grew cautious. "What kind of class?" "At the community center in Brooklyn Heights. It's for 4 to 6-year-olds once a week. Painting, clay, basic creative expression. A public class," he said, his tone making it clear what he thought of the idea. "Yes, with other children. Real children. Not just the carefully vetted offspring of your business associates." I met his gaze directly. "She needs this, Adriano. She's too isolated." His jaw tightened. "You know the security concerns." "I do, and I've already spoken with Michael about the logistics." Michael, I'd learned, was his head of security, the stone-faced man who'd been in the car that first night. "The center can be secured. Proper protocols can be established." Adriano's eyebrows rose slightly. "You discussed this with my security chief before me?" "I did my homework before presenting the proposal," I said evenly. "Isn't that what you would do?" A hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. "Using my own methods against me, Sophia?" "Learning from the best," I countered. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "I'll consider it." Coming from Adriano, it was practically capitulation. I pressed my advantage. "There's one other thing. Emma's birthday is next month." "I'm aware," he said dryly. "She should have a proper party, with other children." Now his expression closed entirely. "Absolutely not. The security risks can be managed," I interrupted. "A small group, thoroughly vetted. Here, where you control the environment. And where would these children come from? Emma has no friends her age. She will, after starting art class," I pointed out. "And there are children of your business associates. Your legitimate business associates," I emphasized. "She deserves this, Adriano, a normal childhood experience." He was silent for a long moment, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he said, 3 children, maximum, and Michael oversees all security arrangements personally." I smiled, knowing it was the best I would get. "Thank you." He waved off my gratitude with a slight gesture. "Don't thank me yet. If there's the slightest security concern, it will be canceled immediately." "Understood." As he rose to leave, he paused, looking down at me with an odd expression. "You're changing things, Sophia, more than I anticipated. Is that a problem?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. "No," he said after a moment. "It's why you're here." The art class proved transformative for Emma. Though initially shy and reluctant to interact with the other children, by the 3rd session, she had formed a tentative friendship with a girl named Lily, whose father, I later learned, was an investment banker with peripheral connections to Adriano's legitimate businesses. The connection had been thoroughly vetted by Michael, who now accompanied us to every class along with another security team member. Lily asked if I can come to her house. Emma informed me one afternoon as we rode home in the town car, her latest watercolor masterpiece carefully preserved in a folder on her lap. I glanced at Michael, whose impassive expression revealed nothing. That sounds like fun. I'll discuss it with your father. Emma's eyes, so serious for a child her age, studied my face. He'll say no. The simple certainty in her voice broke my heart a little. You don't know that, sweetheart. He always says no to going to other people's houses. Because of security, she said, the adult word sounding incongruous from her small mouth. I reached across to squeeze her hand. Let me talk to him, okay? Sometimes grown-ups can be persuaded to change their minds. She looked skeptical but nodded, returning her attention to the passing scenery. That evening, I brought up the invitation during our balcony meeting. As I expected, Adriano's immediate response was negative. It's not possible, he said flatly. Unknown location, too many variables, insufficient control. Lily's father is James Peterson. You know him, I pointed out. From what Michael tells me, he's been thoroughly investigated and has legitimate business connections to your shipping company. Adriano's eyes narrowed. Michael has been rather forthcoming with you. He understands what I'm trying to do for Emma. And what is that, exactly? I met his gaze steadily. Give her as normal a childhood as possible within the constraints of your world. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, something unreadable shifting in his eyes. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, would you go with her? Of course, I said, surprised by the question. And Michael, plus 2 additional security. I blinked. You're saying yes? I'm saying I'll consider it, he corrected, if you agree to certain conditions, such as? You stay with her at all times. Michael conducts a full security sweep before her arrival. The visit is limited to 2 hours, maximum. And he hesitated, then finished. I want to meet the parents first. It was more concession than I'd expected. Thank you, I said softly. This means a lot to Emma. Something flickered across his face. Vulnerability, perhaps, or uncertainty. Does she really believe I always say no? The question caught me off guard with its hint of genuine hurt. She's 4, Adriano. Children see patterns and make simple conclusions. He nodded slowly, processing this. I'll make the arrangements to meet the Petersons. Perhaps dinner here next week. I hid my surprise at how quickly he was moving on this. Emma will be thrilled. As he rose to leave, he paused, looking down at me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. You're good for her, Sophia. Better than I anticipated. The compliment warmed me more than it should have. She makes it easy. She's an extraordinary child. Yes, he agreed, his voice softening the way it only did when he spoke of his daughter. She is. As he turned to go, his hand brushed mine, the contact brief, but electric. For a moment, neither of us moved, the unexpected touch hanging between us like a question neither was prepared to ask. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the night sky and the unsettling realization that Adriano Castellano was becoming more than just my employer. The dinner with the Petersons proved surprisingly normal, if one ignored the security sweep beforehand and the staff who moved with practiced invisibility around us. James Peterson was a distinguished man in his 40s, with a quick laugh and none of the nervous deference most people showed around Adriano. His wife, Claire, a pediatrician with warm eyes and a gentle manner, immediately put both Emma and me at ease. Their daughter, Lily, already in pajamas beneath her dress coat, had brought a stuffed unicorn as a gift for Emma, a gesture that left my normally reserved charge speechless with delight. The girls seemed to have bonded at art class, Claire observed as we adults shared coffee in the living room after dinner. Emma and Lily were playing nearby, their heads bent together over a puzzle. Emma talks about Lily constantly, I confirmed, smiling as the girls whispered conspiratorially. The class has been wonderful for her. James swirled his espresso thoughtfully. Lily's been asking when Emma can visit. Our home is quite secure. Gated community, doorman building. I felt Adriano stiffen slightly beside me on the sofa, though his expression remained pleasant. Security is a particular concern for my family, he said smoothly. I'm sure you understand. Claire exchanged a glance with her husband. Of course. In your position. The unspoken acknowledgement of Adriano's reputation hung briefly in the air before Claire gracefully changed subjects. Emma mentioned a birthday coming up. Perhaps we could arrange something around that time? I held my breath. watching Adriano navigate this normal parental exchange that was clearly unfamiliar territory for him. "Actually," he said after a moment, "Emma will be having a small celebration here. We'd be pleased if Lily could attend." The invitation, delivered with the same gravity he might use for a business proposition, made me hide a smile behind my coffee cup. "That would be lovely," Claire replied warmly. "Lily will be thrilled." By the evening's end, it was settled. Lily would come to Emma's birthday celebration, and Emma would be permitted a closely supervised playdate at the Petersons' apartment the following week. Watching Adriano shake hands with James at the door, I felt a small surge of victory. One small step toward normalcy for Emma. "That wasn't so terrible, was it?" I asked lightly, as we stood together in the hallway after our guests departed. Adriano's mouth curved slightly. "The doctor was interrogating me," I laughed. "Claire? She was just making conversation." "She was assessing whether I'm a fit parent," he corrected, though without heat. "The questions about Emma's routine, her schooling plans, her pediatrician, those weren't casual inquiries." I hadn't noticed the pattern, but now that he mentioned it, Claire had asked several questions that could be interpreted that way. "She's a pediatrician. Professional interest. Professional concern," he countered, though he seemed more amused than offended. "She was determining whether the dangerous Mr. Castellano is raising his daughter appropriately." The self-awareness in his tone surprised me. "And her verdict?" "Reserving judgment, but leaning favorable," he replied dryly. "Thanks largely to you. Me. Your presence reassures her, a normal, nurturing influence in Emma's life." His eyes held mine. "She's not wrong." The simple acknowledgement warmed me. "I'm glad it went well, for Emma's sake." "Yes," he agreed, gaze shifting to where his daughter had fallen asleep on the sofa, the stuffed unicorn clutched tightly in her arms. "For Emma." As I moved to lift the sleeping child, Adriano stepped forward. "I'll take her." I watched as he gathered Emma into his arms with practiced gentleness, her small body curling instinctively against his chest. The contrast, this dangerous man cradling his daughter with such care, never failed to move me. "I can get her ready for bed," I offered as we walked toward her room. "No," he said softly. "I'll do it tonight." I nodded and stepped back, watching as he carried Emma into her bedroom. Something shifted in my chest. A tightening, a warming that I wasn't ready to examine too closely. The playdate at the Petersons went smoothly, despite Adriano checking his phone for security updates every 15 minutes. Emma returned flushed with excitement, chattering about Lily's room, their games, the cookies they'd decorated. For days afterward, she seemed lighter somehow, as if the simple experience of playing in another child's home had opened a door she hadn't known existed. "Lily has a mommy and a daddy," she observed one evening as I tucked her into bed. "And a baby brother." "She does," I agreed, smoothing her dark curls away from her forehead. Emma was quiet for a moment, her small face serious in the dim light from her bedside lamp. "Do you think my mommy will ever come back?" The question pierced me. We'd had variations of this conversation before, but never so direct. "I don't think so, sweetheart," I said gently, choosing honesty as Adriano and I had agreed. "Sometimes when grown-ups leave, they don't come back." She nodded, accepting this with a resignation no 4-year-old should possess. "That's what Daddy says too. Your daddy loves you very much," I reminded her, "and so do I." The words slipped out naturally, and I realized with a start that they were true. In the 3 months I'd been living in the Castellano household, this solemn child had completely captured my heart. Emma studied my face carefully. "Even though you're not my real mommy, love doesn't care about real or not," I told her, gathering her small body against mine in a hug. "It just is." She seemed to consider this, then asked, "Does Daddy love you too?" The innocent question caught me completely off guard. "What makes you ask that, sweetie? He looks at you different," she said with a child's simple observation. "And he smiles more when you're here." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "Your daddy and I are friends. We both care about you very much." She accepted this non-answer with a small nod, already drifting toward sleep. I kissed her forehead and slipped from the room, troubled by her perception and by my own confused feelings. The truth was, something had been shifting between Adriano and me for weeks. Our evening conversations had grown longer, more personal. His customary reserve softened around me in small, subtle ways, a lingering glance, a casual touch, a rare full smile that transformed his stern features. And I, despite all my initial wariness, had begun to see the man beneath the fearsome reputation, brilliant, lonely, devoted to his daughter, carrying wounds he rarely revealed. I found him on my balcony that night, though we had no scheduled meeting. He stood looking out over the city, hands in his pockets, lost in thought until I joined him. "Emma asleep?" he asked without turning. "Yes. She had an interesting question tonight." "Oh?" Now he glanced at me, profile sharp against the city lights. "She wanted to know if you love me." I watched his reaction carefully, saw the slight stiffening of his shoulders, the careful control that settled over his expression. "Children are remarkably perceptive," he said after a moment. "They see patterns," I agreed. "She says you look at me differently." Now he turned fully to face me, amber eyes intent in the dim light. "And how do I look at you, Sophia?" My pulse quickened under his steady gaze. "Like you're trying to solve a puzzle, or like—" I hesitated, then finished honestly, "like you want something you're not sure you should have." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Remarkably perceptive indeed. We stood in charged silence, the unspoken shifting between us like a living thing. "This is complicated," I said finally. "Yes. I work for you." "A technicality," he countered. "You've become more than an employee, and we both know it." The simple acknowledgement of what had been building between us hung in the air. I took a steadying breath. "What exactly are we doing, Adriano?" He moved closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. "I think you know. I need to hear you say it." His gaze never left mine. "I've developed feelings for you, significant ones." The direct admission, delivered with his characteristic precision, still managed to take my breath away. "That's problematic." "Why?" "Because of who you are, what you do." I gestured vaguely. "Your world." "My world has many facets, Sophia. Not all of them dangerous." "But some of them are," I insisted. "I've seen the men who come to your study late at night. The conversations that stop when I enter a room. The calls you take in Italian that change your entire demeanor." He didn't deny it. "Those aspects of my life are separate from my home, from Emma, from you." "Are they? Can they be?" I challenged. "What happens if someone from that world decides to use your personal attachments against you? Isn't that why you have so much security? Why Emma lives such an isolated life?" His expression hardened slightly. "I would never allow harm to come to either of you. That's not a promise anyone can keep," I said softly. "Not even Adriano Castellano." He was silent for a long moment, the muscle in his jaw working. Finally, he said, "What are you afraid of, Sophia, truly?" The question cut straight to my core. "That I'll fall in love with you," I admitted, the words escaping before I could stop them. "That I'll let myself believe in something that can't last. That Emma will get hurt when it all falls apart." Something softened in his expression. "You assume failure before we've even begun." "I'm being realistic." "No," he countered, taking another step closer. "You're protecting yourself, the same way I've protected Emma, by building walls, controlling variables, minimizing risk." His voice lowered. "But there's no safety in isolation. You taught me that." The echo of my own arguments about Emma's socialization being turned back on me was startling. "That's different, is it?" One hand came up to touch my face, his thumb brushing lightly across my cheekbone. "You've changed things, Sophia, for Emma. For me." His eyes held mine. "The question is whether you're brave enough to let things change for you too." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I care about Emma too much to risk hurting her." "Emma loves you," he said simply. "As do I." The words, spoken with such quiet certainty, stole my breath. "Adriano." "I don't say that lightly," he continued, his gaze never leaving mine. "I've loved exactly 3 people in my life, my mother, my daughter, and now you." "You can't know that," I whispered. "It's only been a few months. "I knew the first night," he countered, "when you saw my daughter crying and understood what no one else had. What I hadn't been able to give her myself." His hand cradled my face with exquisite gentleness. "I knew when you challenged me, refused to be intimidated, put Emma's needs above your fear. I knew, Sophia." The raw honesty in his voice undid me. Before I could formulate a response, a soft voice came from the doorway. "Daddy? Sophia?" We both turned to find Emma standing there in her pajamas, clutching her unicorn. Adriano stepped back, his hand falling away from my face. "What is it, Piccola?" he asked gently. "Another bad dream?" She nodded, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Without hesitation, Adriano crossed to lift her into his arms. "Would you like to sleep in my room tonight?" he asked. To my surprise, Emma shook her head. "Can I stay with Sophia?" Adriano's eyes met mine over his daughter's dark curls, a question in them. I nodded, holding out my arms to take her. "Of course you can, sweetheart," I said, as she transferred her warm weight into my embrace. "Let's get you settled." As I turned toward my bedroom, Adriano's voice stopped me. "I'll say goodnight then." Something in his tone, a careful neutrality that didn't quite hide his disappointment, made me turn back. "You could read her a story," I offered. "She always sleeps better after one of your stories." The invitation hung between us, laden with meaning beyond the simple words. After a moment, he nodded, following us into my bedroom. Together, we settled Emma in the middle of my bed, each of us on either side of her, a family tableau that felt both foreign and strangely right. Adriano's voice, deep and melodic, wove the familiar fairy tale of a princess trapped in a tower, rescued by an unlikely hero. Emma's eyes grew heavy as he spoke, her small body relaxing into sleep between us. When the story ended, we sat in comfortable silence, watching our daughter, for she had become ours somehow, in these months together, sleep peacefully. "Stay," I said quietly, meeting his gaze over Emma's sleeping form. "Just to sleep. Just for tonight." Understanding filled his eyes, that this was a beginning, tentative but real. He nodded once and stretched out beside Emma, one arm protectively cradling her small body. I turned off the lamp and lay down on Emma's other side, our small family cocooned in darkness and possibility. Across the sleeping child, Adriano's hand found mine, fingers intertwining. "Whatever comes," he whispered, "we face it together. The three of us." It wasn't a traditional happy ending. There were still complications, dangers, uncertain futures to navigate. But as I looked at Adriano's face in the dim light, softer now, at peace, and felt Emma's steady breathing between us, I knew I had found my place in this unexpected family. "Together," I agreed, squeezing his hand. 6 months later, Emma got her birthday wish when Adriano and I were married in a small ceremony in the Japanese garden where I'd first seen the real man behind the fearsome reputation. She stood beside us in a blue dress, sprinkled with embroidered butterflies, beaming as she became officially what she'd been in her heart for months: our daughter. Life with Adriano wasn't always easy. There were still late-night calls, mysterious meetings, aspects of his business that remained closed to me. But he kept his promise. Home remained separate, sacred, protected. And as time passed, I noticed subtle changes, legitimate businesses expanding, questionable ones fading, a gradual shift toward a life that could step fully into the light. "For you and Emma," he explained simply, when I questioned the changes. "For our future." When our son was born a year later, pink and perfect and untouched by the shadows of his father's past, I saw in Adriano's face the completion of a transformation that had begun the night a waitress dared to tell a dangerous man what his daughter truly needed. The Mafia boss who had once inspired fear throughout the city now read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, coached Emma's soccer team under the watchful eyes of security guards who faded further into the background each year, and rocked our son to sleep singing Italian lullabies his mother had once sung to him. "You saved us," he told me one night, as we stood on the balcony where so much had begun, watching the city lights shimmer. Both of us. I shook my head, leaning into his embrace. We saved each other. His arms tightened around me, and in that moment, safe, loved, complete,